Welcome to the ICN and FAIR Food Allergies Ask Me Anything webinar. I'm your facilitator, Patrick Butler, Education and Training Specialist at the Institute of Child Nutrition. Before I introduce today's panel of experts, we would like to thank you, our audience, for joining us for this special webinar. Thank you to those of you that submitted the questions for the experts to answer this live during the webinar. Due to the overwhelming number of responses, we are unable to answer all of your questions live. Our panel of experts will work to answer these questions after our webinar. As always, the views and opinions expressed in this webinar are solely those of the presenter, our presenters, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Institute of Child Nutrition. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Can each of you please introduce yourselves and share your expertise regarding food allergies?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Dixon. I am an education and training specialist at the Institute of Child Nutrition. I actually help write and develop most of the food safety resources here, including most of the food allergy resources. And I'm very excited to be here today. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to Kelly.
Hi, how are you? My name is Kelly Cleary. I am the Senior Director of Education and Support Programs at FAIR, Food Allergy Research and Education. I'm a pediatrician. My background is in emergency medicine and mental health, and I also wear the hat of mom of 4 children, one of whom has multiple food allergies. So thanks for having us today. I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am Tiffany Leon. I'm Assistant Director of Training and Professional Programs at FAIR. And like Liz, I help to develop a lot of the food allergy trainings that we have for early childhood care providers and food service professionals in the K-12 college university setting. So I'm glad to be here. And I will pass it to Anita.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. My name is Anita Roach. I'm the Vice President of Health Equity and Community Engagement at FAIR. I'm deeply focused on access to care and access to resource issues, as well as other health equity issues such as food insecurity. Thank you, and I will pass it to Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Likewise, with the remainder of the FAIR team, I'm just overjoyed to be part of this webinar to ask us anything during Food Allergy Awareness Month. Timely topic. Both Tiffany and I are registered dietitians, like Liz, on staff at FAIR, and I am the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and have a very long multi-decade history of working in the food allergy and food policy space. So look forward to interacting with all of you today.
Thank you so much. As you can see, we are joined by an amazing group of panelists, and we are so excited about our webinar today. So now we are going to show a polling question on your screen. Please answer this question. It's regarding food allergies in your child nutrition program. All right, and now we have our results. How confident do you feel about managing food allergies in child nutrition setting? Very confident, 36%, somewhat confident at 61%, and not confident at 3%. So it seems like most of you are very confident or somewhat confident. So that's great. We thank you so much for responding. And now the moment that you all have been waiting for, let's ask our panelists anything. So our first question that was sent in was during regular production, is it necessary to have special pots, pans, cutting boards, knives, refrigerator, freezer, preparation area spaces in areas away from all other production for appropriate safety measures for significant food allergy situations? Would someone like to answer the question, one of our panelists?
I will answer first. And so this is one of those situations where you kind of have best practice, and then you have other practices that are also safe that you can do as well. So kind of your best practice is to have that separated, allergen-free utensils, allergen-free area for prep work. But if you're in a location in a center or a school where that's not really applicable, making sure that you're properly washing, rinsing, and sanitizing all the utensils, all the different surfaces, and everything before you prepare allergen-free food. Also making sure you prepare that allergen-free food first, that you cover it, label it, and then making sure you store it away from allergen containing foods so that you don't have that risk of cross contact. So is it necessary to specifically have all this equipment? No, it is not a requirement, but it is a best practice. But if you can't, you make those allergen-free things first. You can have an allergen-free designated shelf in a fridge or a dry storage area, making sure that anything you prepare that's allergen-free, you cover it, you label it, and making sure it's stored away from those allergen-containing items.
I would just jump in here to say that there may be some equipment in your kitchen that is harder to clean and harder to make sure is super safe if you are using it for dual purposes. A toaster comes to mind. I remember when I was working on college campus, we had a separate designated toaster for the gluten-free bread, the gluten-free bagels, to make sure that there wasn't any cross contact for when the students were kind of making it themselves. That's really hard to clean, those breadcrumbs. Remember, even a trace amount of food can cause a food allergy reaction. So as Liz said, if you don't have the opportunity to have these designated spaces or equipment, even smallwares for food allergy safe production, you want to make sure that anything that you are using is clean from the start, starting with a clean prep area, starting with clean equipment, largewares and smallwares in the kitchen, making sure your apron is clean, setting up the schedules so that maybe preparing the allergen-free meals first. There are a lot of ways to circumnavigate the lack of designated allergen-friendly space.
Thank you so much, Liz and Tiffany. So for our next question, does anybody else want to respond really quickly? All right, so our next question, question 2. Is it safe for a peanut allergen person to consume cookies that did not contain peanuts, but the packaging stated it was processed in a facility that processes peanuts?
Thank you, Patrick. I'll kick this one off that, there's a lot, that precautionary statements such as processed in a facility that processes peanuts are not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration on packaged food products. They're entirely voluntary. They have to be truthful and not misleading, but it's not an assurance that a product is safe. And to be perfectly cautious, particularly with the risks in the school environment, I would recommend that you not purchase products that have precautionary allergen labeling statements such as may contain or in a shared facility. And you also have the power to put those types of requirements in your specifications for the foods that you purchase for the students in your programs or in a child care program as well. So I think that's great. Anita, I'm going to kick it over to you because you've been with us a little longer on back when we did our food allergy consumer journey and have a few additional thoughts to add.
Thank you, Bob. So I just want to reiterate what Bob said. And just hone in on the fact that consumers, the patients and caregivers and students facing food allergy at your schools, it's also challenging for them to understand the precautionary allergen labeling. We did a survey a few years back with a market research organization and found that there are about 40 different precautionary allergen labeling statements that are commonly used. And to the point that Bob said, they're not regulated and they all mean different things. And so just want to hone in on the fact that, especially for the students, their families, these labels can be really challenging to understand. And that's without even literacy considerations.
I would add to that, I am a numbers person, and I think that when I was, looking into these own labels, even for my own family and for my son, I kind of always was asking, well, how great is the risk? And I think that that's what's really hard to know when something is made in a facility or, may contains, or any of these advisory and precautionary labels that are not, they are voluntary. So I had read at one point that there was, people, they had looked at in one small sample how much peanut protein was found in some of these products that were labeled with these voluntary guidelines. And, at one point it was that they tested 200 and it was 20 out of 200 were found to have any sort of peanut product. And then I think it was 10 to 13 out of 200 were found to have, at least 1 milligram of peanut product. So for me, that allowed me to adjust the risk for myself and know, my child with severe food allergies will not be eating those types of products. But I also say, look to the family, of the child that you may be serving, to, end up looking at what that family's threshold is as well. I know for me, it's not going to happen, but, again, as we improve with diagnostics, we may be able to look at some of those thresholds a little more closely.
Thank y'all so much. I do want to mention that I have seen several chats come through the Q&A. We thank you so much for those questions. We are going to try to get those at the end of the webinar. So we do see them at the very bottom of your screen. You'll see a little Q&A tab and you can click that and send in your questions. And if we have time, we will answer those questions. All right, now we have a polling question number 2. This polling question is going to come up on your screen. It's about which method do you find most effective for communicating food allergy to students and parents? All right, so written materials was 48%. This could be flyers, handouts, etc. Verbal communication, such as meetings, announcements, was at 21%, and then online platforms such as websites, emails, newsletters, that is at 31%. Thank you so much for responding to our poll. All right, our next question, question number 3, is what is the best way to educate parents and teachers regarding food allergies? And this is 2 parts, so I'll ask the first part and then I'll ask the second part after.
So I'm happy to take that. This is something that I work alongside Tiffany and the rest of our team a lot on at FAIR, and that's educating both parents and school professionals about food allergies. And I know that we do a lot of webinars in the back to school time frame that provides a lot of resources on not only how to recognize signs and symptoms and how to treat food allergies, but really how to create the policies that are best practice. So we work hard to kind of do that in the back to school timeframe. We have tons of resources on foodallergy.org that are directed towards school professionals, and then others that are directed toward parents, especially parents that are newly diagnosed and have kids that are newly diagnosed. So I know as a parent, my preference is always to educate probably in person when that's not feasible. Webinars are wonderful. Obviously written materials. I know my preference is definitely in a forum such as this, where people can actually ask their questions and make sure that they're understanding, because it is so important.
I
Thank
would
you
love
so
to
much.
just add there that especially for the parents, it's so critical, and something that I partner with Kelly, Tiffany, and the team on is making sure that that information is in plain language and easy to understand. So that's a big focus of ours at FAIR. And so when you go to foodallergy.org, you'll see that a lot of the materials, whether they're or not they're for the patients, the families, even the providers, we really try to make things clear and easy to understand. And that's so key.
And Anita, you reminded me, oh, sorry, Liz, that it's also important to educate people that, the families that don't have food allergies. Sometimes we're so focused on everyone who has a touch point to someone with a food allergy, but sometimes the biggest, impact is when we're educating people that have no exposure to food allergy and have no knowledge, because that's where we get the greatest gains in the education. Sorry, Liz, I'm going to hand it over to you.
And it's a great opportunity, Kelly, for educating those without food allergy to eliminate and not have people engage in bullying.
I also just want to jump in here because I'm not doing other work. I'm trying to answer some of these questions in the Q&A as we go along, but sorry, Michelle, I answered the wrong question in your box, but her question was, how do we balance confidentiality and ensuring all staff know which students have food allergies? And I think, while we want to make sure that there is confidentiality and a lot of aspects around health, and maybe Kelly can chime in here as a pediatrician, but for food allergies, in my opinion, the more people that know, the better. If it's someone at the cash register, if it's someone on the front line, if it's someone in production, if it's someone in procurement, if it's someone in the front office, the more people that understand that this child is managing food allergies will ultimately keep them safer.
I agree with that, hands down. Not only as a pediatrician, but as a parent of a food allergic child. Like, I want everyone to know. The one thing that is, if you are working in a school, when we talk about hospital or medical settings, we talk about HIPAA, but within the school settings, we talk about FERPA, right? So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So, in visiting a lot of schools, someone had once asked me, oh, well, can we put pictures of the kids up that have food allergies? Because, some of the questions that we got in prior to this webinar were, well, how do we identify them? If someone new is working in the cafeteria, how do we do that? And that becomes the challenge, because putting up pictures would violate some of those FERPA and privacy policies. So that can't be. So it's really about, how do you disseminate this information within the people that need to know? And then developing that second line of communication for when there are people who are, substituting for someone, or when there is someone out. So that to me is some of the biggest challenge, is balancing shouting it from the rooftops, but also maintaining the privacy through FERPA.
And that actually is a great segue into the second part of this question, is what is the best way to educate child nutrition professionals regarding food allergies?
I will kick this off if that's okay. And I'm going to blend the first question and the second question. Always make sure when you're educating somebody, whether it's the parents, the teachers, the food service people, you really want to make sure that the education they're getting is applicable to their roles. So you don't want to be overwhelming people with information that they may not need to know. So making sure, and FAIR has amazing resources, and so does ICN, that are directed toward different audiences, your school nurses, your bus drivers, your child care workers, your school nutrition professionals, having kind of targeted education as well, really will help them not only grasp the needed information for their job, but apply it back to them. It kind of helps them realize what I need to do in my role to make sure that these children with food allergies are being kept safe. One of the ways to educate child nutrition professionals, and this is a shameless plug, is the Institute of Child Nutrition. We have several available free food allergy resources, including for schools, we have a face-to-face training. We've got 4 online courses. We have 14 different fact sheets. We have a standard operating procedure for serving food to children or students with food allergies safely, and a poster. And then for childcare, we have separate fact sheet sets on handling food allergies for adult daycare centers, for childcare centers, and for family in-home daycare. And we have 6 online courses specifically designed for food allergies in adult daycare settings. And coming soon, we're very excited about this, we will have a face-to-face training for food allergies in CACFP. So we are by far not the only place that you can get tons of free resources. And I know FAIR has tons of resources they want to talk to as well, but definitely when it comes to educating child nutrition professionals, making sure that the information is applicable, that it's role specific. You know, you don't want to be teaching your cashier how to mini plan if they don't need to know that information. Making sure that they know their responsibility and their role in keeping that child safe or that student safe, and ensuring that not only are they getting training, they're getting training regularly, especially as stuff changes, regulations and laws. We just got a new major allergen for sesame. Like, people need to know that information. But would anyone from FAIR like to chime in on educating child nutrition professionals for food allergies?
I'm happy to jump in here since this is my main role at FAIR. I dropped a link in the chat, and I can't remember if it's active for just the panelists or for all participants, but if not, we can share it out afterwards. We have a training specifically for early childhood care providers. I know that there are many of you on this call today, so thank you for joining. This is like a 3-part module, goes through so many ways how to advocate for your little ones, but also how to serve meals to them safely. And then we have our Fair Check training, which is available on demand or instructor led. We do offer scholarships for that training. So if you want to train 10 people or 300 people, you could do so pretty easily. And I can drop a link in the chat for that as well. The next instructor training will be mid-July, and then we'll host it again in November. But you can take the on-demand one at any point when you want to.
Would anybody else like to chime in before we move on? All right, well, just to let you know, we will be posting links to FAIR's resources in the chat. We should be posting, sharing them here, so that you can have those. All right, so our next polling question number 3. It should be coming up on your screen very soon. I see it now. Okay, here it is. I was about to say, I don't see it. Have you received formal training on accommodating students with food allergies? Yes or no? All right, we're seeing a lot of responses. All right, so 53%, 52% said yes, and 48% said no. Whether you said yes or no, you have both FAIR and the ICN to go to for training for accommodating your students, and also resources So hey, it's great that you came to our webinar because now you get exposed to those resources. So now we're going to ask our next question, question number 4. When accommodating multiple allergies, how can we create menus that have variety and that are equivalent to what is being served to other students? Would one of our experts like to answer?
I'll kick it off with just the comment of be creative. It's, it doesn't have to be exquisitely limiting. Obviously, when you have multiple food allergies, that does raise the bar on the challenge in coming up with substitutions and alternatives. But it can be done. Just as an example, we annually have 2 big events at FAIR. One is our FAIR Summit held in the fall, and the other is our Courage at Congress advocacy couple of days. We managed successfully to have top 9 free plus gluten-free food service, and it does take a lot of effort. Make no mistake about that, but it is doable and plenty for people to eat.
And no mustard.
Food, and that just can be also really liberating when you have options that meet the needs and are tasty and safe, then you can break through barriers that are unbelievable. And I'll let others chime in.
I would jump in here and just say also to work with some of your vendors. There may be products out there that could be easy subs that you're just not aware of. Products are being introduced to the market all the time. If you're accommodating a lot of the same, even if you're accommodating multiple allergies, if you're accommodating multiple students with these allergies, it may be more beneficial to get, larger quantities of some of these foods, or switch all of the food products to the more allergy friendly brand. I'm just using this as an example. Let's say you're buying a pre-made sauce and there's one that has a wheat and soy allergy in there, but there's another same type of sauce that only has a wheat allergy. If you consistently buy the other product, then you are automatically avoiding that other additional extra allergen. So I would work with your vendors, just try and see what other products might be out there.
I'd also say talk with the families. They're creating these meals every day, multiple times a day for the kids, the kiddos on the weekends, summer, so they can be part of the solution. And I think that shared decision-making can really be beneficial for everyone.
I fully agree, Anita, but you must be a better cook than me because I need to ask the nutritionists and everyone else. And as Bob had mentioned at our events that we hold at FAIR, watching this buffet be served to food allergic, a population of hundreds of food allergic patients is one of my favorite parts of these events. And my second favorite part of that lunch or dinner is coming home and being able to recreate some of those things that were delicious. And I think it wasn't until I really worked at FAIR that I understood the notion that food can be safe and really good. For many years as a food allergy parent, I really focused just on the safety. And I sat in a conference last year from someone from Sage Dining, who the whole purpose of it was to talk about how we can do both, make it safe and really, excellent quality. And that's now, I think, really just it, as Tiffany said, what we do when we're planning these events, it's completely about going through vendors. It's about looking at every ingredient. But then once you have that and have a repertoire, it's easier to kind of go back and recreate those. So I think it can be done. It is, as everyone said, a challenge though.
And one thing I would definitely encourage is, and this is kind of an old saying, but don't recreate the wheel. See what's out there. If you're struggling with this, someone else may be struggling with it as well and already found a solution. One of the benefits that ICN has is the child nutrition sharing site. So it's theicn.org/CNSS. And what that is, it's a gigantic database that holds different documents and recipes and menu items from child nutrition programs all throughout the US. You may be able to find a recipe, a standardized recipe there that provides the allergen-free options you need. But definitely also staying creative. We also have our Culinary Institute of Child Nutrition, which offers the ability to learn different kind of spice blends and different kind of cooking styles and different kind of trainings that have the potential to make those allergen-free items, but maybe make them from scratch or try a different seasoning profile. So definitely checking out your free resources, checking out and seeing what people have already out there, and not necessarily putting it all on yourself to have to create those menus completely from scratch.
All right, thank y'all so much. So our next question. We are a small school, but growing. I have one warmer and I have prepped and stored seafood separate from other foods. Is it okay to store cooked seafood with other foods in the warmer? Seafood at the bottom of the warmer and other foods at the top. I had a student this week that asked me if her food would be okay to eat. Her chicken smelled like seafood. I found her something else to eat, did not want to take the chance of her getting sick.
That's, always a challenge. There are volatile components that can carry food allergens. And so my personal advice would be not to have cooked seafood in the same warming tower as other items, particularly if there's any type of a convection air circulation where you could have aerosol items get and cross and then create cross contact. So I would advise against that. Perhaps that you minimize the amount of seafood on a daily basis so that it's a rare event where you can manage your mixtures of foods that need to be kept warm throughout the week more, those types of things. And with that, I'll let others chime in.
Yeah, I would say that you did the right thing in giving her a fresh meal, a new meal. You always want to err on the side of caution. As Bob said, seafood is one of the food groups where the proteins can become aerosolized. It's not just the smell, like there are in steaming and boiling, like there could actually be those proteins that are, in the air. And so I do agree with Bob, just trying to figure out your schedule so that maybe on the days when you are preparing seafood, maybe knowing ahead of time that you need to make a separate dish for her in a different vessel and in a different way, in a different piece of equipment, so that it's definitely separate for this student.
And just one other thing to add is that, also you need to be very careful. It's not just storing in a warming tower or a multiple tray warming device, but you also want to be very careful if you're doing any frying of foods, that you want to have segregated oil for frying, and you don't cook French fries in oil that had been used to cook fish and those types of things, because you don't want to have their cross contact can be in the oil as well.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the questions that I did answer. Can someone allergic to soy have processed foods with soybean oil? And I answered it as typically highly processed commercial oils like soybean oil, which you may be frying in, is refined, bleached, and deodorized, one of Bob's favorite acronyms, RBD. And so those oils typically don't contain, they're so processed that they wouldn't contain the protein any longer. But you want to make sure that anything that's going into that fryer is accounted for. So is it breaded chicken nuggets? Is it mozzarella cheese sticks? Is it, you're introducing allergens into that oil when you are using it multiple times for multiple foods.
Right. And then just to expand a little bit on what Tiffany just said, While many to most people that have either a soy allergy or a peanut allergy may voluntarily choose to avoid products that contain or are fried in soybean oil or peanut oil. What Tiffany said is absolutely true. Strong science and documented oral consumption challenges have documented that there is no presence of soy allergen protein in soybean oil that is RBD, or refined, bleached, and deodorized, and the same for peanut oil. That you can safely consume that. Our food allergen labeling law in the United States specifically exempts RBD oils, and in the law originally in 2004 included by name peanut and soybean oil, but the same could apply for other types of RBD oils that might be used out there for frying or as an ingredient. In a previous life prior to FARE, someone wanted to try to manufacture a keto drink that had coconut MCT oil in it. And I just was like, no, you'd have to ensure that it was an RBD oil to begin with. And they actually they found a manufacturer that did sell both virgin coconut oil and RBD coconut oil and sub ingredient derivatives. So, it can be done, and it can be done safely.
Yeah, if these highly processed oils, whether you're using it for frying or, as Bob said, if it is as part of an ingredient, if any oil is containing some of these top 9 proteins, then it would have to say so on the label, because it may be a cold pressed oil, a cold pressed sesame oil, or cold virgin coconut oil, then it would say so on the label. If it is highly processed, as we've gone through a few times already, then it's likely that it wouldn't contain the oil and therefore not on the label.
And generally, if an oil smells like the source material or tastes like the source material, it probably is not RBD and does contain some residual food allergen protein.
So another thing to remember to consider when cooking an allergen containing food with those that are allergen free, frying is not as common in schools and CACFP, but even stuff like using a tilt skillet or, trying to cook something on the same baking sheet, you want to make sure, or even sauteing food, making sure that you're not, once again, using that, you don't want to cook shrimp and then turn around on a tilt skillet and turn around and cook, chicken on it as well, because of that potential of cross contact. As Tiffany mentioned earlier, even a trace amount of allergen can cause a reaction. And so, like with our warmer question, especially having that shrimp on the bottom, the potential for the steam to go up into other foods allows for that potential for cross contact. So in situations like that, if you find yourself needing a way to keep food warm, potential would be like buying hot packs in a separate cooler and, keeping that food warm in a separate cooler. Also, preparing food ready to serve for that child with that food allergy, but making sure that they don't have that potential to cross contact within that cooking apparatus or warming apparatus. Stuff like steam, if steam gets up and drips down, splatter, anything like that. So the more we can keep allergen free and allergen containing food separate, the better.
All right, so to our next question. What's the best way to respond to a parent's note saying the child is sensitive to wheat? At what point should the child student be asked to bring meals? Does someone want to answer this?
I can start off with this. I think that this is where it becomes really important to have documented allergy, action plans and allergy plans, because those documents are signed by physicians and you get a clear idea of what is really going on with that child. If you're working in a place that does not require a document like that, then this is a time that I would really communicate with the parent to see what exactly is going on with that child, and what are they doing at home to keep that child safe. But truly, it's probably the physician in me that is saying that, from early childhood through adulthood, having this documented as a doctor-led medical form that actually talks about what the child is allergic to, what the symptoms are, and getting that changed every year, because yearly, these things might change. Kids might develop new allergens, or they may lose some of their allergens, but really to understand from a medical perspective what the true diagnosis is.
Yes, I would say with medical documentation, you have something to support the parents' ask, but also, and when we didn't really get into ADA laws yet, but if food allergy is classified as a disability and celiac disease kind of falls under that category as well, anything that's affecting major life activities, including breathing and eating, then you must accommodate, and the medical documentation can support that. So I would respond to it. You're not tasked with deciding whether it's real or not when they're talking about a sensitivity, but I would just ask for more information and ask for documentation so you can better serve the student safely.
Yeah, I just one thing to add to that is, there's so much confusion in the general population and even in, healthcare about the difference between food allergies and intolerances or sensitivities. And I think, especially when we're dealing with kids of any type, I think that erring on the side of being cautious and really seeking that extra information is important. So, you might have someone who comes in and says, my child can't tolerate dairy, without really taking another step there. You don't really know what's going on with that child. That child may be anaphylactic to dairy, or that child may be lactose intolerant. So I think understanding the difference, that a food allergy is immune mediated, a food allergy is life-threatening, and a food intolerance is often GI related and not life-threatening. So I think that really discerning the difference between the two of those, and I think that there's a lot of times that you do need to have medical input on that, so that you could really best serve that child.
Following up on what they were saying, definitely you need that documentation. And one of the best ways to do this is to get the medical statement, not necessarily just a note from a parent, because the parent's note's not really going to tell you what you need to do completely, as well as having that medical statement from like a state licensed healthcare professional or a registered dietitian. That's going to give you all of the more information about how you can best accommodate that food allergy or other food related disability. In the meantime, until you can get that documentation, I would definitely kind of do what you can to assist that child or student and document what you are doing in the meantime. But always never feel like you can't open communication with a parent or guardian or caregiver. If they give you that note, you can kind of sit down and have a conversation with them and say, hey, so you've told me that this person has a wheat sensitivity. Let's discuss what this is going to look like and what we need to be able to best serve that student. So definitely making sure you can communicate with the parents. And then if you have any questions, if you're in CACFP, you can ask your sponsor, your state agency. If you're in schools, going to that state agency, seeing if they have any information about state-specific rules regarding food allergies, or even template plans or anything like that. Once again, you don't necessarily, when it comes to that documentation, have to recreate the wheel. Your state agency may have forms available that you can just present to the parent and say, hey, can you please provide this information so we can best serve your child or student? But making sure that In the meantime, I would definitely, do your due diligence and document what you're doing just so that child or student is safe.
Yeah, especially when it comes comes to some of the, I mean, in every case, but especially when it comes to children that have more than one allergy, or I'm seeing in the Q&A here someone that's avoiding raw eggs. That sounds like they may be on like an egg ladder. Like just getting more information from the parent is great. Can they have mayo? Can they not have mayo? But really getting the support from the physician that's overseeing their case is really going to support the decisions that you make when you are serving the child.
As a parent, I can tell you, I love when people ask me. The more questions, I know that my child is being taken care of well. So, I know that that's not always the case in terms of reaching parents or, parents being open to kind of chatting more, but truly in this type of situation, I think communication is key, and just understanding what it is that you need to accommodate for that student.
Thank y'all so much. And Brad is going to put some of the FAIR resources in the chat. He's about to do that now. And then our last question that was asked before the webinar is, how is the best way to identify young students who don't speak up to tell you they have a special diet need or a food allergy when going through the lunch line? This is especially a concern when they have subs in the kitchen. They have alerts on the point of sale, but this is not helpful at the actual serving line. So this is the serving line, not at the point of sale.
I'm going to love to hear what Liz has to say about this, because, or anyone. I know that this is something that is often a challenge. I wish that the answer could be that if you have a child who is severely allergic, a child who's not able to communicate those needs, a child who maybe you are having a different crew of people who are working in the food service, but having a point person who could potentially help those kids in and navigating the cafeteria and helping those kids who know one another. And I know that that's a luxury in a lot of places and that there aren't extra staff, but even to just teach the child that there is a point person that they could ask to know that. And then otherwise it really does come down to, again, communicating to everyone who's involved in a touch point of serving that food, which children have food allergies. Just a personal story. I know when my son started middle school, and by this point he is developmentally able to communicate his needs, yet is a 12-year-old boy who I don't really trust to navigate the process himself. He's learning to do that, but I don't trust it in every way. He had a couple of people within the cafeteria that were those point people that he could ask. And by the end of probably the first month of school, everyone in the cafeteria who worked in the cafeteria knew of him because he had multiple food allergies, and really then had a whole staff of people who were his point people. But I think it comes down to really communication. If it's at all possible, having a point person to help guide, students who have multiple dietary restrictions and food allergens in the cafeteria.
And kind of building off of that with communication, it's also building that relationship with the students who have food-related disabilities, making sure that even if they may not, I was not the most confident person in middle school and high school, but if you build that relationship and let them know that you can talk to you regardless of where you are on the serving line, even if you have a sub that day, if they feel like they can talk to the next person in the line or the next, the next teacher at the child care center, making sure that those children have the confidence and the knowledge that they can speak to people, building that relationship, that fundamental boundary will help as well. Also, this is going to sound really odd, having some redundancy built in, like definitely having, if you're in a school, having that point of sale, definitely a good way, good reminder, good flag. But making sure that everybody is also trained on what they need to do and and that includes subs, making sure that they are completely trained on food allergies as well and are informed, and that they're not just getting basic, like wash your hands and get on the line. Making sure that everyone is receiving the same food allergy training and receiving the same information, and that they're not afraid to speak up as well, as if they're encouraged to say something if they suspect something. So making sure that communication channel is open, that training is happening, and those relationships are built so that everyone feels okay to speak up if they need to.
Liz, I love that because it's not only about educating all the people in food service, but as someone in food service who's helping that child, you are educating that child and allowing them to start to advocate for themselves. And we even saw that the first few weeks or 2 weeks that my son was in middle school. Every day he would come home and I was like, "What did you eat?" And he said, "Dry pasta, dry pasta, dry pasta." And then once he really felt like he could start asking people, by the end of the third or fourth week, he came home and said to me, "I was in the kitchen today." I said, "Well, why were you in the kitchen?" And he said, "Because I asked them if the oil had stuff in it that I was allergic to." And the person within food service took him to the back and showed him that they actually had 2 vats of oil that they were frying food in, and one was labeled top 9 free. And that was my moment where I was like, everyone is doing their part. This was not something we taught him at home, but it was the teachers, the people in the cafeteria, everyone was looking out for him. But not only was he safe, but then he learned to really take that a step further and actually ask about cross contact. So he got some gold stars that day from me.
And I will also add this before we move to our next question. Before coming to ICN, I was a school nutrition manager in a school. So just to add, make sure that for me, I did not put any new subs on my serving line that were not, that did not really know my students. And I also made sure that every single person on my staff knew every student with a food allergy. They knew who to talk to, so that if they did not see the normal person that was typically on the serving line, if for some day somebody had to step in, they still knew that they could ask that person. So definitely making sure, as everyone else is, that your students feel confident to talk to the staff and discuss with them their needs. So I see we have some questions in the Q&A. We only have about a few minutes left to go, about 7 minutes left to go. So are there any questions that our panelists would like to answer from the Q&A before we wrap up here? If we can't answer all of these, we will answer these at a later time.
I just wanted to make a general statement about some of the questions that I've seen. We've been keeping an eye on them. Thank you so much for submitting the questions. We love to hear from you. We love to, try to help as much as we can. A lot of questions have been about finding different allergens on labels, whether they are the major 9 or not. If they're not a major 9 and you're looking for an allergen on a label and you suspect it may be in a food, feel free to call the manufacturer. You can explain your situation and say, "Hey, I have a student or child with this allergy. I'm trying to make sure this food is safe." And they'll let you know whether or not that product contains that allergen. And then I see a lot of people concerned about, I'm trying to use soybean oil, but there's a soy, is it okay for soy allergies and all that? And please, people from FAIR, feel free to speak in. If it's got allergen levels, usually on the allergen statement, it'll say like contains soy or has soy. But that highly refined soybean oil will most likely not have that allergen warning if it's not something that's a person with a soy allergy is going to react to.
The only thing to add to that is it's that, soy lecithin is a very common food ingredient, and that would pretty much generally trigger the fact that you would have to, if there was not soybean oil in the product, but soy lecithin, and the manufacturer included the contain statement, it would then be contain soy. But the fact that the product had soybean oil and soy lecithin in it, if it says contains soy, the soy protein is only coming from the soy lecithin. As we've mentioned several times, refined, bleached, and deodorized oils don't have food allergen protein. There was a similar question related to corn allergy and high fructose corn syrup. That should be, even though that's not an oil, that should be highly, highly refined. Certainly corn oil for food manufacture also should be an RBD type of oil as well. So I'll stop there so we have time for another question.
All right, does any of the experts see another question you'd like to answer from the Q&A?
I was just going to say that there are a few questions on the precautionary allergen labeling statements for those that are new to the food allergy space. There are the contain statements or the FALCO regulated statements where the manufacturer must put the ingredients in plain language, either in the ingredient statement or in a contain statement. But then some manufacturers add additional language on the label that say may contain or made in a facility. And I think Kelly brought this up before, where we're trying to decide if families are also avoiding these precautionary labels. And she saw the study where it does contain them in many cases. And one of the questions was, how do we determine if our district should recognize the food items that are manufactured? Some families get really upset when you remove more than you need to. And I can understand over restricting, it kind of cuts down on choices, and removing some of these may limit what you can offer. But erring on the side of caution, knowing that many of these may actually contain this allergen and could cause a food allergy reaction, I think erring on the side of caution is always better. Regardless of what your district may choose to do, it's always important to be very transparent so that the student, the parent, caregiver, they can make informed decisions on whether or not they can or cannot eat it. And I don't know if Bob wants to weigh in on anything else for precautionary labeling.
No, that's really sufficient, Tiffany. I just came across an additional question. It was a question related to sesame oil. And I just want to reiterate for the whole group understands that, yes, sesame oil is generally, and I have worked in the food industry and I am completely unaware of the existence of RBD sesame oil. There would be little economic benefit in going all of the extra steps of producing RBD sesame oil. So sesame oil would be one to avoid using in food you may make in a child care or school food service setting, because it would have residual sesame protein. As I mentioned, if it smells like sesame, if it tastes like sesame, it probably has sesame protein in it, or what you name the oil. So just wanted to get that additional clarification because that was a good add-on to our discussion of oils.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Time flies when you're answering questions because we've gone an hour now, and so our time is up. I would like to thank our panel of experts for joining us today. As mentioned, if we were unable to answer your questions live, our panel of experts will work to answer those questions for you. For free food allergy resources, visit foodallergy.org and theicn.org. Again, thank you to our audience and experts for joining us today. Have an amazing rest of your day.